Hey everybody, it's Alistair, aka That Pesky Social Worker, coming to you from my glorious hammock. Well, I mean, that's not really mine, it's more of the house's, but for this moment while I'm occupying it, it's mine. So today, again, is not going to be a heavy education day. I just wanted to sort of, I guess, give a few responses to a couple of the responses I got yesterday to polls, and then also just pass along some quick stuff. So, one of the, actually more than one of the responses that I got was that people are feeling some anxiety, and I'm not sure in what context it's about. Maybe it's the pandemic, maybe it's family situations, things like that. So just as a quick sort of tip for the people that are experiencing that and the people who provided that feedback in the polls yesterday, there's obviously a lot of different ways that you can handle anxiety. There are a myriad of ways, both pharmaceutical and homeopathic. There's also natural interventions as well. I'm not going to be making any specific recommendations at this time, other than just to give a brief overview of how I handle my anxiety. So, for me, I am a person that does have an anxiety disorder that I'm slowly working on not being able to take medication for, but honestly, when the pandemic came back around, all of my medical professionals that I was working with were like, yeah, no, this is the worst time to stop taking your anti anxiety medication. So I've been able to actually bring the dose down, but that is something that is a part of my component of what I do. It's not on a PRN. I take one in the morning, one in the evening. And then, in addition to that, for my own sort of health management, and different people have different feelings on this. This is not me telling you to do these things. I will tag some of the companies that I do use if they have Instagram handles. One of them that I've actually been using pretty consistently is a brand called Level Up Mushrooms, and it is a blend. It's called the like max level, I think it is. It's cordyceps, chaga, and lion's mane that are all together in one. There's a lot of really great scientific literature on how those are beneficial for your nervous system, also for depression, anxiety, inflammation. So there's science-backed literature behind these things. Am I being paid to say anything about Level Up Mushrooms? No, this is literally just me talking about what helps me with my anxiety. So in terms of medications and supplements, I do take an anti-anxiety medication. I also take a mushroom supplement. I take a third, which is reishi. That's a third, actually, the fourth type of mushroom that I take, the third type of supplement. And then I also have vitamin D. Occasionally there's a B complex, and then I'm looking to add fish oil. So why am I doing all of these things? I'm again not deep in the education. There's a lot of really good information if you hit up Google on the benefits of fish oil and in terms of just nootropic things that just support healthy brain chemistry. Now, I recognize that that can't all be fixed by supplements. Some of it is diet based as well. So, when it comes to the diet aspect of managing my mental health, I am looking for things that are healthy and good for my gut. Once I am in a place where I have more consistent income, I'm actually going to be booking an appointment with a nutritionist to figure out what's going on. Because part of my anxiety has manifested itself in the form of disordered eating patterns, but not an eating disorder, if that makes sense. And I realize that I'm doing a lot of like personal open amnesty right now, but that's part of how we share and grow. So I have those thought patterns and those habits, but I don't have a full blown disorder because I don't have the concern around my weight. It's more of the fact that I lived in poverty for a really long time and couldn't afford groceries. And you get, and people who suffer with eating disorders will tell you this, at a certain point, there becomes a mindset of, I can wait, I can wait. And I can wait 15 more minutes turns into half an hour, turns into an hour, turns into 4 hours, turns into a day, turns into I'm eating once every 1 to 3 days. So that's something that I'm trying to do because if you are not well nourished as a human being, you're going to have more depression, more anxiety, more brain fog, more inability to be productive in the ways that you want to be productive. This is really a holistic take on it all. So that's medicine, that's supplements, that's nutrition. Now, in terms of physical exercise, I have what I like to call a very wonderful, beautiful cop out, and that is my dog. Grace is really good for keeping me up and active. We get up at 6 o'clock every morning, sometimes earlier. Not by my choice, but by hers. When I first got Grace, I was working at a pediatric inpatient facility doing intensive outpatient, which is you spend 8 hours a day doing therapy and then you go home. And when I got Grace, I had to start my day at around 5:15 to 5:30 in the morning. So she got used to be, and I'm pointing that way because she's further in the yard. She got used to waking up that early. And so when I changed jobs and I moved from doing peds to doing home health, and I was actually not having to drive 45 minutes just to get to office, we had to shift our schedule. She's still an early riser. What's really funny is that she'll wake up and then we do our routine and then she goes right back to bed. And so our morning routine consists of me waking up. I take a green coffee supplement that's got electrolytes in it that I drink first thing in the morning because I'm trying to move away from coffee. I try to drink some chai as well, but I will admit I do have my cups of coffee. And then that walk that I go on with Grace is typically 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes a half hour if we take 2 laps around the block. It sort of depends on how much she's sniffing. And what I found for me is that having that physical activity first thing, like I don't look at, like when I wake up, I literally turn off the alarm and then I lay in bed for about 2 to 5 minutes, depending on how I'm feeling when I wake up. And I just sit there and get into my body because what I've noticed about myself and my anxious state and my anxiety is that I'm like, like I have a list and I just like bang through it. And I don't take time to set intention before I embark on any of my activities. I don't take time to think about the outcome that I want. All I think about is here's the list of shit that I need to get done. And that's not healthy because that leaves no room for joy. That leaves no room for enjoyment. That leaves no room for fun. Like, if you're literally just looking at your day as like, here's the list of everything I need to do, and you're not building in any kind of break, any kind of joy, any kind of recharging activity, anything that brings you some sense of peace and relief, then no wonder you're tired all the damn time. This is what I'm figuring out about myself. So for the physical exercise piece of it, it's walking Grace a lot. I've also started, as I'm sitting in the hammock, I've actually added to part of getting the vitamin D in my system in addition to a supplement is I try to spend at least 20 minutes outside every day. Sometimes I'm lucky enough and I'm able to hit a nice like Zen meditative pocket where I'm not asleep, but I'm not entirely awake. I have situational awareness. I can hear everything that's going on, but I'm in a very relaxed state. And I think that having the sun exposure, having that meditative space, and also just being more connected with nature, like even though I was living in Maine, I wasn't spending a lot of time outside because it's still cold up there, y'all. Like, for real. The fact that it's in the 70s here is wild to me. So I can spend more time outside versus, just walking the dog. And then in terms of the last component for me is spirituality. Now, I recognize that not everybody believes in a formal sense of God or formal religions. There are people who identify as spiritual, meaning that they have some kind of other belief, but it's not in an organized doctrine. For me, what I've found in part of my process of trying to get myself back on my feet and dealing with my anxiety and other issues that pop up in my life is becoming reconnected with my spiritual life. And that doesn't mean for everybody, that doesn't necessarily mean going to church and, cracking your Bible or your Quran or your Torah or, whatever your religious text is, and sitting with it and having a deep revelatory experience. I've actually started reading some of Soren Kierkegaard's writings. He was actually a philosopher in the believe mid to late 1800s, who had some very interesting insights on religion and takeaways and purpose and meaning. And part of my goal with this platform and with what I want to do is provide people with an ability to find a sense of purpose, to find a sense of passion for that purpose, and then to also find peace within themselves. And that can take the form of self-love, self-forgiveness, self-healing. That purpose piece is, I really am of the belief that everybody's here for a reason. I don't think it's an accident. I don't. There are some people who are in the law of attraction space that very much believe that, in a fifth dimensional spiritual level, we requested to be here on this three-dimensional plane. Jury's out for me on that one. I haven't read enough to have an opinion. But I think that all existence is intentional, even if we didn't consent to it, if that makes sense. Like, you and I did not consent to be born. We did not consent out of the lottery of genetics for, this egg and this sperm to fuse and create this human. We didn't get a say in that. We didn't consent. Nobody asked us. We were just summoned from the ether, thrust into life. And I think a lot of us, when we realize that, we get resentful about it. And then instead of moving past nobody asked me about this, my permission wasn't asked, and I don't want to be here, and people get stuck in that bitterness instead of being like, okay, no, I don't have a choice in being here, but I get to choose what I do with this time and what I do with what I've got while I'm here. So for me, creating that purpose is really important, and finding it is also important, because I think there is purpose in everything, even in the really crappy, seemingly nonsensical things. In previous videos, I've said sometimes your silver linings are aluminum foil, meaning that in a really crappy situation where there's really not anything super beneficial that came out of it, sometimes the best thing, sometimes the silver lining, sometimes the blessing is that you survived. And sometimes that has to be enough. That has to be okay. Profundity will not always abound. Amazing, wonderful insights will not always happen. And that's, I think, a trap that a lot of us get sunk into. So to recap, because I've been kind of rambling here for the last 10 minutes, in terms of anxiety management on my end and what I do, I use a combination of anti-anxiety medications and then research-backed supplements that have literature on their uses for anxiety, depression, and inflammation. For the nutritional aspect of it, I'm working on trying to eat better, eat more consistently, and address some of the disordered behaviors that I have, which is mostly just restricting. It's just getting more calories into my diet, eating better things. For physical activity, I have Grace. We get up, we go for walks. I clock between 8 to 10 miles a week in walking, honestly. And I've thought about progressing beyond that, but because I'm at such a calorie deficit right now, I feel like vigorous exercise and going back to CrossFit is not a good idea for me, so I'm okay with just walking. And then for me, in terms of dealing with anxiety on an existential level, like why am I here, what is the purpose, spirituality is very, very important to me, and so that's something that I spend time with in, I think prayer and meditation are very much the same thing. I think the difference is that traditional prayer, we usually think of asking for something. Meditation is typically more of a present mindfulness and a gratitude kind of way. And there is gratitude in prayer as well, but I think it's ultimately the practice of you getting in touch with something other than yourself, some higher source, whatever that means to you. And I actually had and this is the last tangent little story that I'll tell. I had a friend of mine who is not a spiritual religious person at all whatsoever, but one of the programs that she was in required, the acceptance of a belief in some kind of higher power. A lot of recovery programs, whether you frame that in substance recovery, eating disorder recovery, mental health recovery, spirituality is a component. And it was really difficult for my friend to find an aspect of spirituality when she had so firmly identified as an atheist for so long. And what she ended up doing was that for her to sort of get to this place of like, okay, there needs to, like, I need to accept that there's some kind of higher power. For her, the higher power is the amoeba, like the single cell organism. And the reason why the amoeba for her is the higher power is because the amoeba, the first amoeba that ever existed, still exists. These single cell organisms, it's been a long time since high school biology for a lot of us. They are these single cell organisms that literally just replicate themselves. Like, it's the same genetic information again and again and again. So technically the first amoeba that ever came into existence is still here. And when my friend was able to latch onto that, into that idea of, wow, this thing that came into existence is still here and it's been around a whole hell of a lot longer than the rest of us, that was a concept that she could latch onto, and that was a higher power that she was like, okay, if an amoeba can survive all of the bullshit of humanity and the changes of the earth and still survive, like, that's something I can get behind. So those are just sort of my, I would say quick and dirty, but they're not quick and they're not really dirty. Those are my points on how I'm handling my own personal mental health when it comes to anxiety related stuff. If you have your own tips and tricks and things that you do to handle how you're feeling with general anxiety, whether it's capital A in terms of an anxiety disorder or lowercase a, meaning the world is a scary place and there's a pandemic going on. Whatever your coping skills are around anxiety, I would love to hear them. I would love to have a dialogue about it. Whatever your favorite one is, I would love to hear. And also, here's a challenge if you're lasting this long. I would love for somebody to post what their least favorite coping skill is, or what the least helpful thing someone has told them in a state of anxiety. So that's all I got for you today. I hope everybody has a wonderful rest of their Thursday, and I will catch you all tomorrow morning. Bye.